What's going on, everyone? My name is Liam and welcome back to another video. Today I've got quite an interesting one for you. I've compiled a bunch of phones from my collection that I think are unique, and today we're going to go ahead and go over those phones. And I've got a lot of them, ranging from smartphones, as you can see right here, to feature phones, which I have right here. So without further ado, let's get started. Now the way I'm going to go through this is I'm going to go through the smartphones first, and then we'll go over the feature phones. So first up, we've got these two right here. This specific one is the Motorola Fusion Plus, and this one is the Motorola One Hyper. Both of these phones are beautiful in color, as you can see, but that's not the only interesting part about them. Both of these, while being mid-range phones, have pop-up front-facing cameras. As you can see right here, there's the front-facing cameras. And besides that, this Fusion Plus isn't really that interesting. However, this one is. This one is actually rooted, and it's running a custom Pixel ROM, so it runs stock Android, it has a bunch of things turned off, and yeah, I think it's just a pretty fun, unique phone to mess with. And of course, both of these phones work totally fine, there are no issues with them whatsoever. Next up, we've got this. This is the Galaxy S Continuum, and the reason this is so special is, if you can't see right there are two screens. So you've got the main interface screen right here, and then this screen would display extra apps or music that's playing, stuff like that. And it was overall a very interesting phone. Now, I've had this phone in my collection for a very long time, and while it used to work, unfortunately, now it just doesn't. And I haven't been able to figure out why. I took it apart last night to see if there was anything wrong with the motherboard, and I couldn't visually see anything. So unfortunately, I won't be able to show you guys this today, but I thought it would still be interesting to show you the two screens right down there. Moving along, however, we've got this one right here. This is the BlackBerry DTEK 50, one of BlackBerry's last Android phones, and phones overall. Now, there isn't much interesting about this on the surface, but if you dig deep and do a little bit of research, you'll find that this isn't really a BlackBerry at all. This is based on the Alcatel Idol 4. So it uses the same body, style, and all that kind of stuff, and it just has a different color, a different back panel, and some different software on it, including some of BlackBerry software itself, such as BlackBerry Messenger and some of their security stuff as well. Now, I've also had this phone in my collection for a very long time, and it used to have a broken screen, but I found a parts phone on eBay, so I snagged that for about $11 and fixed this phone and returned it back to original condition. So very happy with this. This is a Galaxy S2, and while there's not much special about this specific phone right here, this is also a Galaxy S2. Or is it? No, not really, but it definitely looks like it. But when you look closer at these phones, you'll find that this one is a little bit smaller, as you can see, and that this one runs Windows Mobile. The model number of this one is the SGH i937. And what I find very interesting about this phone, besides the fact that it looks like an S2, is the fact that, again, it runs Windows Phone. Samsung didn't really do many collabs with Windows Mobile. At the time, most of their phones were running Android, but this is one of those exceptions. And of course, this phone runs totally fine. There are zero issues with it at all. Besides the fact that it's dying, I guess. But yeah, no issues with it whatsoever, and it's a good phone to have in my collection, for sure. Speaking of Galaxy S phones, we've got another one. This is the original Galaxy S, or is it? Not technically. Let's put this one to the side, because this one right here is the real deal. This is a fully unlocked Samsung Galaxy S with the home button. Now, these are pretty hard to find as of right now, including the regular one that you could get in the States. This one came from Canada a long time ago. I've had it in my collection for a very long time, and as you can see, it works. There are no issues with this phone whatsoever, and it's definitely a cool one to have in my collection. What an awesome boot animation. Let's go ahead and slide to unlock. Oh, didn't quite do it right. But yeah, as you can see, this is the home screen of the Samsung Galaxy S. Once again, this phone has zero issues, and I love it. Alright, this is the last Galaxy S. that I have to show you guys. This one is the Galaxy S Captivate. And what's so special about this one? Well, look at it. It's such a nice design, especially comparing it to the original Galaxy S. This one just has such a nice design. And what I also find interesting about it is to remove the back cover, you have to pop open this right there, and then you can remove it just like that. Now, another thing is this back cover is metal. It's aluminum. So, yet again, extra points for this one compared to the other one. But let's go ahead and turn it over and see if it has any juice, which it should. So yeah, this phone has zero issues at all. There's nothing wrong with it. It's taking forever to boot up. But then again, it is an older phone, of course. There we go. As you can see, no issues with it whatsoever. This one works totally fine, and I love having this in my collection. Next up, we've got the last Samsung smartphone I have to show you guys today. This is the Samsung Double Time, and that name is not for the sake of it. It's because there's double the screens. Both of these screens are touchscreen, and it has a full QWERTY keyboard as well, which is very interesting. This is another phone that's been in my collection for a very, very long time, and it works totally fine. But yeah, here is the screen. I guess the phone is dying, but it does work totally fine. There are no issues with it whatsoever. There it goes. Again, these are old phones, that's just how it is. But like I said, both of these screens are touchscreen, as you can see. So we'll flip it over just like this. Wow. Oh, there it goes. Alright. Absolutely wild. I know. So yeah, pretty cool phone. Moving along, we've got my favorite BlackBerry in my collection. This is the BlackBerry Classic. This phone has such a timeless design, and it's very unique because even though this has a full keyboard and all that kind of stuff, it's a little bit unassuming. But this phone is touchscreen, and the software that BlackBerry used for this phone is also based on Android 4. So what's weird about this phone is that you can download Android apps on it. Alrighty guys, so now that I have this thing powered on, let's go ahead and go through the things that I've downloaded. So I've got Instagram, I've got Smash Hit, we've got Car Driving Simulator Extreme, SUV Driving Simulator, I've got YouTube, Slither.io. Look, I've got so much things on this. I even installed the Play Store on this phone, which did not come on it to begin with. As you can see, there's Minecraft PE, we've got Temple Run, and yeah, I mean, I've just done so much on this phone. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't really run things very well. It was never really made to run any of these games, but still, it's such a unique phone to me, and I'm super thankful to have this thing in my collection, especially in the condition that it's in. It's really not in bad shape at all. Next up, we've got this. This is the Sharp Aquos Crystal. I'm pretty sure I said that correctly. This is the original borderless display phone. I say borderless because, as you can see right here, it has a huge chin. But if you ignore the chin and you just look at the top right here, this thing looks futuristic as heck. And as you can see, this phone works totally fine, and just look how mesmerizing these borders are. I mean, this has thinner borders than a lot of the phones we have today, but as you can see, this thing works totally fine. There's no issues with it whatsoever. I have messed around and downloaded a bunch of apps and games on this thing, and yeah, it's a very unique one for the collection, that's for sure. Next up, we've got this phone right here, the Microsoft Kin. This is super rare, as Microsoft didn't really make a lot of these to begin with. It was a huge flop for them, and luckily mine works. I'm pretty sure this phone was marketed towards younger people, like kids and all that kind of stuff. So it was very interesting to take a look at the software on this phone, because it's very, it's just interesting. If this thing boots, I'll go ahead and show you. Just look at that. That's so weird. Now, unfortunately, mine's not in the greatest shape. As you can see, the front has yellowed a little bit, and it has a lot of scratches and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? this is such a rare phone that I don't really care. The only real thing I care about is the fact that this thing works. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with it in terms of functionality. Next up, we've got one of the coolest ones in my collection overall. And it's in this protective bag right here. This is the Sony Xperia Play. Let's go ahead and slide it out. And as you can see, this is why it's in the bag. This thing is immaculate. There are no dings, no scratches, no nothing on this thing. It has a screen protector installed, and even when I wipe it down, the screen protector has no scratches on it. Like, this thing is literally immaculate. As you can see, this phone turns on and it works. And what's so unique about this one? Well, when you slide it open, it has a PlayStation controller in it. If you're able to get your hands on one of these, which by the way is pretty hard to do, I would 100% recommend it, because even though you can't really find any games for this thing on any stores, as you can see, I've got some emulators on this thing. After all, this is an Android phone, and they did have a huge fan base for this phone back then, so a lot of the emulation apps work with the D-pads and the controller inputs and all that kind of stuff. Oh, and I forgot to say, besides the controllers, it also has some left and right clickers on the back as well. This is just such an overall cool phone, and I've been messing around with it for a little bit, but I plan on getting some more emulators and games on this as well. Last but not least, for the smartphone segment of this video, I've got the first Android phone ever. Not just one, but two. These are the HTC G1, and they were the first Android phone in production. Both of these phones work totally fine, thank God. And what's so unique about them, besides the fact that they are, of course, the first Android phones that were put into production, is how this thing slides out. I mean, look at this. Is that not weird? That is very weird. And the shape of this thing reminds me of an old brick phone. It's kind of hilarious. But yeah, both of mine are in very good shape for the age, and they both function totally fine. I don't know if they're going to boot. They might be dead. That's okay. That's okay. I'll try one more time, and if not, then unfortunately I'll just have to put them to the side. And as you can see, here's one of them. This is the only one that booted, unfortunately. I had to shove Nokia batteries in these things to get them to work, because the original batteries are shot. But as you can see, this is Android One. But just soak it in. This is what Android used to look like, if you guys didn't know already. Both of these are such cool phones to have in my collection. I've had both of these for a very long time, and I plan to keep them for even longer. So yeah. Now that we have all the smartphones done, let's go ahead and go over the feature phones. Alrighty y'all, so starting off with the feature phones, first up we've got this Sony Ericsson phone right here. Unfortunately, I don't have a charger for this phone, but one of the unique parts about this thing is the way this battery is connected. It's almost like a house phone, in a way. Like, if y'all remember those early 2000s house phones that have the batteries just like this, it's basically the same thing. This is the T62U. And like I said, unfortunately, I've never been able to try this phone out. However, it's still such a weird, unique design. This almost looks like a baby toy, in a sense. I like the color contrast, and the fact that it uses a kind of joystick to move around instead of a regular D-pad. It's just an interesting phone. I'm sure it has just a monochrome display, but yeah, I just find it pretty cool. Next up, we've got this LG phone right here. This is the VX8300, and when I flip it around to the front, as you can see, it's kind of music oriented. We've got some music controls up on the front right here, and another interesting design is that we have speakers on both sides. Instead of a speaker on the back or the earpiece being the only speaker, this has some loud surround sound-esque speakers on the sides, which is very interesting. This phone works totally fine, as you can see. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with this one whatsoever. It's just a interesting little feature phone just because of the design. Moving along, we've got this. This is not a Nokia 3310. This is the Nokia 3360, the more unknown brother of the 3310. If you can't tell, this is basically the exact same phone as a 3310, just with a slightly different design right there. But this phone works totally fine, and I just thought it was interesting because, you know, it is. It's a cool little Nokia phone, but I guess the battery is dead. It does work though, as you could see, so yeah, we'll put this to the side. Moving along, we've got the Motorola 60i. This phone in particular is unique, not only because of the full metal housing that it has, but also the fact that there was a specific version of this phone that came with Mercedes cars back in the day. That's right, back when they sold cars with phones in the glove box, this was one of the phones that they would come with. Unfortunately, I don't have the Mercedes variant, but if you did get the Mercedes variant, it would have a Mercedes badge right here instead of a Motorola badge. This phone works totally fine. As you can see, it has a monochrome display, and it's just an interesting little phone. But an even cooler Motorola phone that I have is this one right here. This is the i95CL. The CL stands for color, because as you can see, this is one of the phones back then that had to boast about having a color display. There was a version of this phone that came out without a color display. It had one similar to this phone right here, but this one luckily is the color one. And I think it's just a 16-bit display, but that's still super cool. It is dying. I'm using the battery from the other Motorola. So as you can see, this one works totally fine. That's that beautiful 16-bit display in the back right there. And yeah, this one's just an interesting phone. By the way, look at the thickness, dude. This thing is thick for a flip phone. I mean, imagine hauling this thing around back then. What a wild time. Next up, we've got this BlackBerry right here. This is the BlackBerry 7520. And this thing works totally fine besides the battery being completely shot. But I thought this was just a very unique phone because, I mean, again, look at the thickness, right? And for those that didn't know, this is how BlackBerries were controlled back then. You had this little scroll wheel right here and you would go through all the apps just like that. I'm very glad that I have this one because this is in super good shape for the age. So yeah, we'll go ahead and put this to the side. Next up, we've got the last BlackBerry in this video. This is the BlackBerry 7100i. Thankfully, this one has a working battery, so I don't have to keep it on a charger forever. But again, this is one of those BlackBerries that's controlled by the scroll wheel on the side. And as you can see, this thing works totally fine. I think the scroll wheel on this one is a little bit iffy, but besides that, it's a good little phone. Moving along, we've got another Nokia phone right here. This is the Nokia X300, and it is a slider phone, as you can see. Now, what's so unique about this one is the fact that it has some music player stuff right here. It's just an interesting design of this phone, and as you can see, this one works totally fine. There's no issues with it whatsoever, except for the battery dying. Nokia back then was so good at making phones. I mean, this is such a beautiful design, and it's honestly still timeless. Moving along, we've got another Nokia X3, as you can see. This, however, is the X302.5. Unfortunately, when I got this phone, it didn't come with a battery or a back cover. However, the battery from the other X3 sorta fits. Sorta. It fits good enough to turn this thing on. Unfortunately, as you can see, the screen has some dead pixels on it, but that's okay. What's interesting about this one is the fact that even though this thing is so small, it's touchscreen. So I think this is just a very unique phone to take a look at. It's just super weird. I don't know what to think about this phone. And what's crazy about it too is, even though this thing is so old, it has Wi-Fi. So that's kind of cool. Next up, we've got this. Yeah, this thing's in pretty rough shape. And this is the VX8800P. If you can't tell already, what's unique about this one is the fact that it doesn't have a traditional D-pad. It has a touchscreen right here. Now, this phone does work, however, the touchscreen for the D-pad does not. It used to work, but I mean, this thing's in such poor shape that I think it just kind of offed itself in my collection. But yeah, this is the interface for it. As you can see, this thing, it just doesn't work. But if it did, this is where you would select stuff right there. And of course, this screen was used for other things like shortcuts to the messaging app, contacts, shortcuts, and calls, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I just think it's a very cool phone. I just wish it worked. But what does work is this LG right here. The model number is the VX8550BLK. And this is a pretty unique phone as well. Unfortunately, mine's in pretty bad shape and it does have a mismatched battery, but besides that, it does work totally fine. Besides the little light for this button right here. Now, what's so weird about this phone is, of course, the lights for this D-pad right here, and the fact that this isn't just a D-pad, it's a scroll wheel. So I think that's pretty cool, and of course, if you don't want to use the scroll wheel, you can just use the D-pad buttons itself, but come on now, using the scroll wheel is much cooler. Now, this LG right here has an even more unique design. This, if you can't tell already, is a slide phone. Ain't that weird? The model number for this one is the PM325. And this phone works totally fine besides the backlight for the screen. Sometimes it flickers in and out, but besides that, there's no issues with this phone whatsoever. Oh. That's definitely late 90s, early 2000s. But yeah, I think it's just a very unique little design. I haven't seen anything else quite like this before. Yeah, pretty cool one to have in my collection. Next up, we've got this. This is the Motorola Rocker E1. Otherwise known as the iTunes phone. As you can see, there's a little iTunes logo right there, and if we hit that button, it goes to the iTunes interface, as you can see. Now, I don't have anything on this phone, but I think it's such a cool phone to have in the collection because these are super hard to find. This was a collab between Apple and Motorola before the actual iPhone came out. So technically, you could say this was the real first iPhone, even though it really wasn't. And last but not least, we've got these two Motorola's right here. These absolute bricks of phones. This is the Motorola AirTouch, and this is the Motorola MicroTac. Both of these phones thankfully work totally fine. There's no issues with them at all. And the only reason I was able to get these things to work is because this specific battery pack right here has hidden wall prongs. So you can just plug this thing straight into the wall outlet in your home and it'll charge via that. Let's go ahead and put this thing back on the StarTAC and let's see if it has any juice. Look at that, that's so cool. This thing is awesome. This orange display is beautiful. And like I said, this thing works totally fine. All the buttons work. There's not much I can do with this phone, but the fact that it does work is super cool. And let's go ahead and transfer this battery pack to the AirTouch right here. This phone's a little bit finicky, so I have to hold the back of the phone, but let's go ahead and power this one on. This thing is so cool. Again, there's no issues with this one at all, besides the fact that I do have to press down on the back to make contact with the battery. As you can see, it just turned off. But again, these things work totally fine, and I'm super thankful about that. I actually got this one in a recent phone lot that I purchased. If you want to check that video out, I'll leave a link up at the top right of the video right there, so feel free to check that one out. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. It was pretty fun to go over a lot of these unique phones that I have laying around. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you did, feel free to hit the like button. And if you want to see more content like this, well, go ahead and subscribe and turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on another video. With that being said, I hope you guys have an amazing day or night, depending on where you are, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Peace out.